Okay, so I want to clear up what's actually going on with these widescreen bezels and the bezels that are on the artwork page that you can download. So there's this misconception that there aren't any gaps when you crop one of the standard bezels out there. So let's see what actually happens. Okay, so this is just the normal bezel. And the setting that I have here is cropped because if you do the full view, you're going to see the entire bezel, for the arcade cabinet. And the idea behind this is that it's supposed to look, like actually looking at the real arcade cabinet. If you crop it, you're not going to lose any vertical real estate on the game, but they put in gaps on the left and right just because by trying to mimic the actual look of the arcade, all of these bezels were designed to have gaps in between the bezel and the monitor because in a real arcade cabinet, there are gaps between the bezel and the monitor itself. I mean, especially with those little 19-inch CRTs and arcade cabinets, they really were pretty small. Some of the 25-inch cabinets, actually had monitors large enough to take up most of the space, and there wasn't that much of a gap, but the majority of them were 19-inch, and that's what you get here. So that's fine for a real arcade cabinet, but it doesn't really work with this widescreen setup. I don't want to look at this, disgusting gap while I'm playing a game on a widescreen monitor. So that is how all of the bezels are. If we look at Rampage, we'll see the same thing. So let's do you can see that it's the same deal, and it isn't just the where the toothbrush is. There is actually an intentional gap in the layout file because it's trying to mimic what the actual cabinet looked like, and there was a gap between the bezel and the monitor in a real Rampage cabinet. So that's why. I mean, you can see how the toothbrush actually has a gap between it and the screen. Even if I stretch this thing out with slider controls and just say, let's see, it doesn't matter. You can't fill in that gap. It's just that space between the toothbrush and the screen is intentional. So to me, this looks pretty terrible. It's completely out of context. You can't even see the soldier on the right. You got the left tit of the woman in the other building. It looks stupid. You have the skyline that just abruptly ends in the middle of the building. It's dumb. So that's why I did my bezels. Just because I could clean some of that stuff up and actually handle the pillar box scene, properly. So I'm gonna put this back, and then I'll show you, what I'm doing. So you notice here that I'm not even trying to make it look like the actual arcade cabinet's bezel. I don't care. I couldn't care less. I just want to have some decent art to fill in the sides of the screen there. And so that's what I've done. No gap at all, nothing. And you have some nice original artwork, from the, the artist, that did the, concepts for the game instead of, some dumb cut-off bezel that isn't even displayed in the right context anyway. So that's Street Fighter, and then if I do Rampage, it's the same deal. So boom, no gap, and you can actually see the characters. Oh, that's interesting. I can actually see things. Both tits are visible. You can see the guy who's looking around on the bottom right. It isn't all just cropped awkwardly and uncontrollably. The reality is, to properly fill in the pillar box scene, you're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to figure out how you can manipulate the art to not lose too much information from the sides of the bezel and still fill in the gaps. That's the compromise. You know, that's how it is. So, I mean, yeah, it's a matter of opinion. You know, I realize everybody's going to have a different take on what looks the most, you know, aesthetically pleasing for these bezels, but don't tell me that there isn't a gap, an unavoidable gap beyond just, you know, the space in the bezel itself, because it is. That's just how those layout files were designed. There is a space between the monitor and the bezel in every one of those layout files. You can't get rid of it without changing the layout file. So, you know, that's what I've done there.